Hello everybody and welcome back to a new video. My name is Sarah and today I'm going to be talking about 5 books that define my literary taste. Now I saw Books with Leo do this a couple weeks ago. I will link her video down below. She had gotten the idea from a TikTok trend going around, but I liked her idea where she wanted to make like a YouTube video kind of talking about it a little bit more than like a TikTok 3-minute length video would allow. So I decided to do it here. So these 5 books aren't necessarily going to be like my 5 favorite books of all time, although a couple of them would probably land in that category. I picked 5 topics or ideas that I absolutely love and that I look for in books, and then these 5 books are kind of like the best representation, I think, of that topic or idea. So the first thing that I kind of think defines my literary taste is I love very lyrical prose, very like whimsical, kind of floating fairy tale-esque prose, and I think the best book to represent that, can you guess what it is? It is my favorite book of all time, and that is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This prose is gorgeous. It's not only just very, purple prose, very lyrical, but it has just like this very whimsical feel. Like the story is whimsical and fairy tale-esque, but the prose and the writing itself has that feel, and that's like something that I just absolutely love, both in this book and if it is written and done well in other books as well. I feel like kind of a couple of other examples, like less lyrical than this, but more of like the very fairy tale floaty feel of prose would be Margaret Rogerson's novels. Those definitely feel kind of like the old fairy tale vibe. This feels like a fairy tale vibe because even though we are in kind of like our present day own society type of thing, like it feels like it's happening in the real world, this book is also comprised of a bunch of very fairy tale-esque short stories that all kind of tie together into what makes up the Starless Sea. I definitely think that this is a very good representation of what I look for in books, specifically writing styles. So the second kind of like key factor of my literary taste is very extensive world building. I am a huge fan of fantasy. Fantasy is like my main genre that I read. I'm sure if you've, watched any of my other videos, you will have picked that up by now. But I love extensive world building. I love when an author is able to create not just like one kingdom and an in-depth culture, but like multiple kingdoms and multiple in-depth kind of complicated cultures, and just like really focus on the details, and I think Samantha Shannon does a phenomenal job of that, particularly in Priory of the Orange Tree. This was the first Samantha Shannon book that I read, and then I went back and read the Bone Season series up through all 4 books that are currently out, and I really do think that her world building excels in both the Bone Season series and Priory of the Orange Tree, but I think this is the book that really got me hooked on her writing and really like boggled me in terms of how extensive her world building was in just the single, yes, it's big, it's over 800 pages, but just the single book alone, she was able to take these very separate storylines in various places in this giant world that she created, make them all feel very unique and individual to one another, but also very fleshed out, and then throw them all together in a single story, in a single book, and I was just super impressed by that, and I am constantly chasing that type of like intricate world building that I have found in here. So kind of another aspect of my literary taste is I like really weird psychological books. Like if it's got some sort of weird psychological horror or like mind bendy, mind twistiness, if I've got to really like puzzle things out while I'm reading the book, if you're really gonna like flip my perception of things on its head in the middle of a book, I'm all for that. I love that kind of a thing. And I think the best representation of that would be Bunny by Mona Awad. This book feels like a fever dream. It feels like a really weird acid trip. I've never taken acid, but this is what I assume it would be like if I were to do drugs. But yeah, super strange. This is another one where it comes down to the writing itself and the way that the author is able to write these very like mind-bendy scenes where you're just not sure exactly what's going on, and your perception as the reader, you're trying to like figure out if the characters perceive what they're perceiving is actually happening to them, or if they're kind of like an unreliable narrator and they're not seeing or perceiving or experiencing things in the rest of the character's reality, if that makes sense. And I think that just Bunny is a really good representation of that, and I love that element of thrillers or horror novels. The psychological element is what I'm here for. And then I figured I would throw in kind of like my favorite trope that I look for in books, because you know, tropes in novels is a whole thing that's been going on lately that people have been really fixated on, but I do think that this one is a good depiction of what I love in books, and that is the found family trope. I love when you get a group of characters that just come together and really rely on each other and have these really tight-knit, intricate relationships with one another. Now, I could obviously show A Six of Crows as a kind of a representation of this. It is kind of one of the most well-known found family trope novels, but I think everybody and their mother has read this book, and I have been trying to push this other series for more people to read it, and that is the Books of Babel series, the first one being Ascendant Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. And I think the found family trope is done so well in these, particularly in the second and third books. I have not read the fourth book yet. I'm assuming it's going to still have that same vibe, especially with how kind of the third one wrapped up. This first one, we're more or less getting to meet all of our characters that end up in this like found family, and how they all kind of gravitate and get pulled in together, centered around our main character, Thomas Sunland. However, we spend a lot of this book having Thomas Sunland culminate these friendships and relationships with people, and many of them start out as like adversarial relationships. I wouldn't call it like enemies or anything like that. It's just the situations that they're put in. They're not exactly on friendly terms right away, but I think this is a really good depiction of it. It's also just a really fun fantasy novel. I have pitched it again and again as if you take Bilbo Baggins and you drop him in Steampunk Alice in Wonderland, and I think it's just a really apt description. But what I do really love about this series, aside from kind of the whimsical steampunk feel, is the found family. And then lastly, I really love books that are rich in atmosphere. You can have a book that doesn't even have like a very solid plot, but if you have a very distinct, rich atmosphere and the book is just vibes, I guess you could say no plot, all vibes, but not necessarily no plot, all vibes, because there are some books where it's no plot, all vibes, and I like the vibes, but I was really wanting the plot. It's more some plot, enough plot, but lots of vibes. I would say enough plot, lots of vibes, strong atmosphere. And for that, I'm picking a book series that I actually do not talk a lot about on this channel, but I did really love it when I read it, and that is the Raven Cycle series, the first book being The Raven Boys. I loved the atmosphere of this book, like misty forest, occulty, witchy, tarot card reading vibes. And I'm gonna be honest, it feels like not much actually happens in this series. Like, stuff happens across the 4 books, but the amount of stuff that happens is not nearly as much as what I was expecting going into this series. I remember finishing this book and thinking, what actually occurred in this novel? Like, what actually happened? But I didn't have a problem with that because I was really enjoying the characters, and I was just really enjoying the entire like setting and vibe and atmosphere of this story. And I think this one is one that pulls it off so well. Like I said, there is like a very loose plot and like loose events that do happen, but it is very much a just sink into this and enjoy the atmosphere and the vibes and the feelings and the characters and the emotions and relationships that are going on. And that's just kind of this book, and I really like a book that has a really strong atmosphere. So those are kind of the 5 books that I think best define my literary taste. This is probably one of the shortest videos I've done. I had a lot of fun kind of like looking into what I really gravitate towards in books and what I find the most compelling in a novel. So if you kind of like gear towards my literary taste, or if you have like something else that you describe as your literary taste, I'd love to hear down in the comments. Let me know. I find this just kind of a really cool thought process, something to think about. It's a lot of fun. But thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you consider sticking around and subscribing if you haven't already. But as always, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!